Test-driven development is one of many popular techniques for trying to improve code quality. So in this video, I'm going to go over the basics of it and give you a demonstration of how you would use test-driven development in a simple Rails application. So kind of as motivation, let's look at the goals for test-driven development. Well, the first one is to improve test coverage, to reduce bugs that get into the wild. Obviously, you want to catch bugs before you send them out to your customers. Test coverage refers to how much of the code has actually been tested. When you're testing manually, you can find a lot of bugs, and that's the way it's traditionally been done, but it's also very easy to miss bugs. And sometimes that's simply because it's difficult to simulate the condition where that bug might crop up. So doing test-driven development, which is a method of automated testing, allows you to test some of those situations that would be difficult to test otherwise. We want to create minimal designs. So what this means is when you're writing code, a lot of times it's very tempting to over-engineer. So a common phrase is you ain't going to need it, the Yagni phrase. And basically all this amounts to is if you can get away with, for example, storing something as a hash, you might not necessarily need to come up with some really complex custom data structure that you're going to then save into the database. Just use a hash. Well, test-driven development kind of forces you to work that way. It forces you to give the minimal design. Provide for regression testing is the third thing. And this one I think is probably actually the most important. These other two have some controversy around them. But the regression testing, pretty much everybody agrees on this. What that means is, well, let me just give you an example. You're going along, you're coding, you implement a feature. The feature has a couple of bugs, you fix the bugs, everything's fine. Then a couple of weeks later, you implement another feature, and some aspect of that implementation breaks the first feature that you were working on. Well, unless your testing is really comprehensive, you're going to miss that. Regression testing is running tests that look for regressions in the code, things where you went backwards. And so if you have a full test suite that's built up through TDD, you can always go back and test all of the code that you've done so far and make sure that bugs didn't reappear someplace. So the steps are perhaps a little counterintuitive, but here they are. You write a test, and here's the counterintuitive part, right? You write a test before you have written the code that you're trying to test. So when you run it, it's going to fail. If it doesn't fail, that means you're either not testing anything really, like you're testing whether to see an integer as an integer, or you're testing existing code, and that's not the idea with test-driven development. You're always looking to test new features. So you write a test, you run the test, it will fail. You write the simplest possible code to make the test pass. And this is a little tricky. It's kind of hard to get your head around. Simplest possible code sometimes just means if the test is saying, well, if I add 1 and 2, I want to get 3, the code that you write to make the test pass is just you return the number 3, even though that will never work for any other circumstances. But we'll talk about that in a minute, how that ends up working out. And then the fourth step is we want to go to number 1. So you write a test, run the test, it will fail, write the simplest possible code, and then repeat. To demonstrate TDD, I've created a simple app that has courses, criteria, and then course criteria, which is the join between the two. So you have courses, so like CIS 3333 here, which just has a name field in it. You have criteria, which is how you might judge that course. So student participation, group work, problem solving. And these have just a name. And then the course criteria maps the one to the other. So you can say, well, course 3333 has a student participation grade of 12 and group work of 10 and problem solving of 9.5. So you have a many-to-many, because a course can have many criteria, and a criteria can belong to many different courses. All right? So the idea here is to develop the code that will do some calculations based on these values over here, these scores, for a given course and report them. And we're going to try to do that through TDD.